صديق يحيى العيوني من مدينة نيويورك يعتذر ولكن أرسل المداخلة اللي غنحاول نقراها نحاول بإيجاز وغنستعمل الكرونو واخا غنقراها. العنوان ديال المداخلة هي The Internal Other in Myopia Challenging Social Exclusion and Dominance. So الآخر الداخلي في فيلم مايوبيا، في هذا العنوان الإنجليزي أو فيلم قصار نظر للمخرجة سناء عكرود. تحدي الإهمال أو الإكسكلوجن، الإقصاء الاجتماعي والهيمنة. غنحاول نقرأ المداخلة كما هي. Over the past few decades, the portrayal of women in Moroccan films has transformed significantly. Early films often depicted women as passive and marginalized characters with only a few exceptions. However, recent years have witnessed a shift towards more complex and nuanced representations of women. In contemporary Moroccan cinema, particularly in Amazigh films, women are frequently portrayed as empowered, independent, and strong individuals who challenge traditional gender expectations and roles. Examples of such roles can be seen in films like Nargis Njar's Dry Eyes, L'Hassan Zinon's Mouchouma, and documentaries like Tariq al-Idrisi's La Journée de Khadija or Safar Khadija, and Tala Hadid's House in the Fields, Manzil fil Huqul. In 2020, Sana Akrud released her compelling film Myopia, which tells the story of women's struggle in Amazigh communities. So الفيلم يتحدث عن نضال المرأة الأمازيغية. This film could be viewed as a turning point in Amazigh cinema and the role of women in reshaping gender relationships and subverting power dynamics. بالنسبة ليحيى العيوني يعتبر فيلم مايوبيا هي نقطة تحول في مسار السينما الأمازيغية في علاقتها مع تمثل المرأة. This paper examines the character of Fatim, played by Sana Akrud in the film, as she embarks on a journey from a rural area to an urban setting and confronts the power imbalances between the two. My analysis will focus on the ways in which Fatim challenges the notion of the rural other and deconstructs the internal Orientalist perspective that underpins this concept. The story of Myopia centers around an Amazigh woman who takes it upon herself to fix the glasses of the village's only literate person, the Imam. With no prescription to guide her, she embarks on a journey with uncertain outcomes. Initially expecting a quick trip to a nearby town, she finds herself traveling to Casablanca where she has no connections. Despite the challenges, she remains determined to succeed in her mission. So, بالنسبة لقصة الفيلم باختصار شديد، فاطم غتبغي تمشي للدار البيضاء باش تصاوب النظارات ديال الإمام، لأن الإمام هو الوحيد في الدوار اللي قادر يقرأ الرسائل، وهي كتنتظر الرسائل من الزوج ديالها. إذن خصها تفك المشكل باش ملي غتوصل بالرسالة من الزوج ديالها غتكون حقات يعني، ولا دارت هذاك اللي غيقراها غيكون يعني عنده نظاظر مقادين الى غير ذلك. وغتمشي في رحله للدار البيضاء وغتيه في الدار البيضاء. There is a title, so from forms of dominance, exclusion, marginality and resistance. The filming technique used in Myopia is documentary style. So يقول بأن التقنية المستعملة في الفيلم هي ذات طابع وثائقي. The movie begins with a close-up shot falling on Fatim's bed from the ceiling. She gets up, moves the bed and goes back to sleep. The next scene follows Fatim in the middle of nowhere where she digs out shrubs and branches, piles them up and carries them on her back. There is no dialogue, ليس هناك حوار, only the sound of her footsteps and heavy breathing. The camera mimics real-life situations and engages the viewers by alternating between shaky, medium, and full-body shots as it follows Fatim, highlighting the struggles faced by women in these areas. After returning home, Fatim is shown washing clothes. These short but detailed scenes depict the daily routine of women in these villages who are the first to wake up and the last to go to bed. Though applied in a different context, Gayatri Spivak's notion of the subaltern as marginalized and silenced is helpful in this scene, especially when she emphasizes that the female situation is subaltern is worse. He is quoting Spivak, much like in the context of colonial production, the subaltern cannot speak as the subaltern as female is even more deeply in shadow. It is evident that in the film, Makrud gives Fatima a voice and allows her to speak, to claim her agency and affirm presence. So, هذه الأطروحة التي اشتغل عليها يحيى العيوني أن سنة عكرود تعطي أو تمنح لفاطم صوت و يعني تبرز فاعليتها من داخل السرد الفيلمي. Then, so بالنسبة لفاطم, she is fully conscious of her duties and responsibilities. When the journalist accused her of being selfish in going on the trip and risking her baby's life, Fatim was infuriated and could not remain silent in front of the accusation she received. Her self-awareness is indicative of her ability to speak and defend herself. Then, another scene that shows the failure of the hegemonic discourse to impose its dominance is when the journalist asks Fatim about her religion, and Fatim says that God forgot to visit them. Fatim expressed her anger and frustration in a moment of weakness. Her honest answer was a reaction to the journalist's earlier question about the importance of education and knowledge, which Fatim does not have. Fatim said, it does not matter which God one believes in, knowing God does not require a degree to feel his presence or absence. فاطم تقول بأنه لا يهم الإله الذي نؤمن به معرفة الله لا تستدعي درجة علمية لمعرفة حضوره من غيابه. The second section or subsection, so the construction of the internal other in Myopia, بناء الآخر الداخلي في الفيلم. Edward Said's notion of self and other as they relate to Orientalism could be helpful to some extent in helping us understand the position Fatim and her community occupy in the film. The only difference in othering in Myopia is that this form or Orientalism is done within the borders of the nation state, as Johnson explains. This is Johnson speaking. From a geographic perspective, internal Orientalism represents a discourse that operates within the boundaries of a state, a discourse that involves the othering of a relatively weak region by a more powerful region or regions within the state. End of the quote. Fatim and her community are seen as others in many instances of the film. In a scene when the human rights activists were seen talking about where Fatim came from, one of them said, "She comes from the mountains, she is not like us," and continued, "They endured, they have frightened, and they forgive easily, no matter how harmed she is, and she won't say anything." The activist is speaking for Fatima and her community, reflecting the stereotypical image she has constructed about people living in remote areas. She evokes the us-them concept that Said speaks about extensively. The self tries to always put the other in an inferior position and exercise hegemonic power over them. The other is assumed to lack knowledge and the ability to represent themselves. Fatim is seen precisely in this way from, I'm sorry, okay. Okay, so let's move to the conclusion. Amazigh cinema has gained momentum in the last 10 years. It has become more visible and recognized locally and internationally through film festivals and other venues. The presence of Amazigh cinema has become essential, and its contribution to film as an art form and a cultural representation is vital to social change. Myopia subscribes to this continuous effort by filmmakers to present visual narratives that speak to the Amazigh people's struggle and challenge the power dynamics and mainstream discourse. Sana Akrud, as a filmmaker and actress, proved that making captivating films that speak to people on the margin who have been neglected and isolated is possible. After refusing her screenplay by the Moroccan Cinema Center 3 times, she did not give up and gathered what she could to produce this film. في سياق هذا النقاش الدائر حول السينما الأمازيغية، سنة عكرود تقول بأن 3 المرات وهي كتقدم مشروع الفيلم اللي باش يدعم من طرف CCM وكيترفض. The film narrative shows that the themes discussed are well researched and finely executed. Amazigh people need a cinema that represents them and highlights their presence reflected in their cultures, language, and history. When Nargis Najjar made Dry Eyes in 2003, it was a breakthrough in Moroccan cinema because of its focus on a taboo topic concerning sex work and because it was an Amazigh film. So هنا يلتقي مع ما قاله السي أحمد أن العيون الجافة يعني لا يمكن إنكار مساهمته في التعريف بالقضايا الأمازيغية. In Myopia, events make a different path, but the aim is still the same, to have women and invisible Amazigh communities voice their concerns and resist dominance, cultural or ideological. Akrud questions the role of the nation state in marginalizing these communities and its failure to address the issues. Thank you.